Hi everyone. I I think okay, I think I'm live now. Good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the Native Wellness Power Hour. My name is Jillene Joseph and I will be your facilitator today. And today's topic is on my thoughts on parenting. And so I'm happy to be here. I haven't done a power hour for a while now, like over a month. So I'm super excited. I feel like it's my first one. And just to do a few things. I'm actually going to share it on my page. So the Native Wellness Power Hours, we are now in week 21. We started on March 21st, and it was in response to the pandemic. And so we knew that an already traumatized people would be re-traumatized in this pandemic, and we wanted to do our part and contribute positive and uplifting messaging to our communities and to individuals and families. And so we met as a board and we had a brainstorm, and we came up with the Native Wellness Power Hours that every day we would offer 1 hour of different programming. So we've offered workshops and storytelling and concerts and poetry and comedy and storytelling for little kids, elders movement, and all kinds of things. And we were going 7 days a week, and then we decided to take a break and to go 5 days a week. So now we're going 5 days a week. And like I said, we're nearing the end of week 21, and then on Monday we'll start week 22. And we've had many sponsors from the get-go: Indian Collective, the National Indian Child Welfare Association, the Center for Native American Youth hosted a couple. Um, and this week and for several weeks, we have the Urban Indian Health Institute, which is a institute of the Seattle Indian Health Board under the leadership of Abigail Echohawk. They are sponsoring today and last week and for many weeks coming forward. So we're super grateful to Abigail and her program, the Urban Indian Health Institute, for their support. So, and of course, we're happy that you're here too, to listen and to tune in. And we just welcome you to share the feed so that others can join in. I'm gonna try to share it myself if I can here. Um, so the Native Wellness Institute also this year is celebrating our 20th anniversary. So, in the middle of this pandemic and the revolution, we're celebrating our 20th year. So, we had all kinds of plans for celebrating this year, and some of those plans are still gonna happen. And I guess for now, we're celebrating on the Power Hour. So, yay to the Native Wellness Institute. So what we've been doing as well is taking our work online. And just yesterday, we finished an amazing virtual gathering for Native youth in foster care. It was just really touching and really awesome just to see their resiliency, and it was just amazing. And then today we're finishing a GONA training of facilitators for the Four Winds Indian Education Program out of Chico, California. And we've been doing lots of online training all over the place for different tribes and organizations across the country, and that's been really fun. We're doing another Native Youth Wellness Warrior Camp East Coast for East Coast tribal youth, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And if people are interested, please contact us and let us know, and we'll send you the flyer. It's a free event, and that one's hosted by the Mashantucket Pequot tribe. So we're happy to collaborate with them. So I'm just trying to find it on my phone so I can share it on my page. Um, so I wanted to talk about parenting and um, and my thoughts on parenting and share that with you today. So I first wanted to talk about um, parenting starts before we even have children, and and it really starts with taking a look at who we choose to be a partner with to have the child. And of course, I know in some cases you don't always have to have a partner, right? We have women that you know um, use other means to get pregnant without a partner, right? But in general, I'm just kind of talking about um, people who choose a partner, sometimes it's planned and sometimes it's not, right? So if you're having sex with someone, there's always a chance that you will become a parent because you may get pregnant. So we always have to be mindful of that, right? Who are we having sex with? And then if we are in a relationship, would you want to parent with that person, right? So parenting starts before we have kids and the kind of partner that we want to choose. And then the other piece, especially because this is the work that we do. Um, the Native Wellness Institute exists as an organization because of the lasting impacts of historical and intergenerational trauma. And more importantly, we exist to help our people move beyond that. And we do that in a number of ways, but we have a profound understanding that healing is the answer to trauma. So when we talk about parenting, we also have to take a look at our trauma, and we have to also take a look at the trauma of the person that's going to be the other parent. Okay, let me repeat that again. We have to take a look at our own trauma and how that impacts the way we think, how that impacts our behaviors, and we have to be mindful of the other person's trauma as well. And ideally, we will deal with our trauma by working on our own healing, and ideally the person that we choose to have a child with will have worked on their trauma as well. So that's where like parenting begins before we even have a child. Okay, because what happens is when we when we don't deal with our trauma, it's going to come out and it's going to impact our children, and then they're going to pick up our trauma, and then the cycles are going to continue. Like like when we talk about intergenerational trauma, that's that's what it is, and that's how it keeps going. So so we have to like learn about trauma, and that's what I love about the work that we do at the Native Wellness Institute. Like we teach about trauma in a good way, and more importantly we give like the solutions that people can use for their own healing. So we can't heal people, but we can provide the space for it, and we can provide the tools for it, and then people work to heal themselves. And so being mindful of that. Um so we can see in our families and in our communities how trauma continues to play out, right? And even like this youth foster care gathering that we did this week, I have a lot of friends that have been doing this work for like decades, and some of them tell me that they are now seeing the grandchildren of their original clients. Okay, they're seeing the grandchildren of their original clients. And so that's an example of intergenerational trauma, how it just keeps going from generation to generation to generation. So one of the greatest gifts then that we can give ourselves is to heal some of our own stuff that we carry. And that's also then going to be one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our children. So we're not passing it on to them. And of course, none of us are perfect. I'm certainly not a perfect parent. Just ask my kids. but but I try really hard, right? And before I had kids, I really sat down and did some deep thinking on it, right? Like, why do I want to be a parent, and what kind of parent do I want to be? So that's the other step when we look at parenting, is figuring out like what kind of parent that I that I want to be. And I'm I'm over here looking at my bag because I always use this as an example of the baggage that we carry, and I use like an actual bag. The baggage that we carry like impacts us as a parent. And some of us have like a bag on this shoulder and a bag on this shoulder, and we're dragging bags on the ground because of all the stuff that we hold on to, right? The unresolved grief or the resentment or the anger or the shame or the guilt, or all the stuff that we hold on to, right, is like our baggage. And so when we talk about healing is the answer to trauma, what happens sometimes in our lives is we may take this bag and open it up and take a look at what's inside. And sometimes we may take a look and close it right back up and put it back on and pack it around for another decade or something. And then we may open it back up and take something out, right? We may take something out. Maybe this is the guilt that we've held on to about something, and we decide to do something about that, right? And so we engage some of our healing strategies to let go of that. And sometimes what happens is we'll pick it right back up, right? And we'll stick it back in our bag. And we do that with our thoughts. And so as we go along in our healing journey, we may be able to actually downsize to a smaller bag because we've worked on our healing. And when we do that, it's going to greatly impact our parenting. And so a lot of women in particular, and I'm saying women because we're the ones that give birth, but a lot of women will take their pain and hurt, and instead of working on themselves internally, will choose to have a child to fill that hole, to fill that hurt and that pain. So they're using something externally, like a child, to fill up something internally inside of them. Does that make sense? So this is why it's so important to to deal with that first, and then to have a child, so we're not giving them our trauma to carry. And we can think about, some of us are carrying our parents' trauma or our grandparents' trauma or even our ancestors' trauma, right? Okay, so healing is the answer to trauma. It's super important to do that. And then we can move on to figure out, like, what kind of parent do I want to be? So, hi, Joel. I see you. Hi, Jillene. It's me. I'm looking at some of the comments. Thank you all for tuning in. Um, so when we can think about what kind of parent do we want to be, we can ask ourselves all kinds of questions, even including, like, who parented me and where did they learn to parent, right? So maybe your parents parented you, maybe you were in foster care, maybe your grandparents raised you, maybe everyone raised you. Your parents and aunties and uncles and grandparents had a part in that, right? So before we become a parent, we can think about, what kind of parent do I want to be? And where did I learn to parent? So when I think about my life, like, I learned to parent from my parents. I certainly also learned to parent from my grandparents, from my aunts and uncles, who I also spent a lot of time with. I watched people on TV, I watched family and friends, so all those places is where I learned to parent. And then when I wanted to be a parent, I thought about all of the things that worked on me growing up as a child, and looking at the things that didn't. And then from there, I started shaping the kind of parent that I wanted to be. And so um really what that's about, and I think this is all parents' hope and prayer, is that we want our children, if they choose to be parents, to take the good, like take the good that we did, and like leave the stuff that wasn't so good, right? I mean, like, we want that for every generation, because we want every generation to do better than we did. So that's the other part of parenting, figuring out what kind of parent that you want to be. And so I remember clearly when I had kids before I had kids. So I was helping to raise other people's kids before I had my own kids. So I kind of had practice being a parent, and I had, nieces and nephews and little cousins, and different people that were in my home, or even younger people that I was mentoring before I had kids, and that helped me too. And then when I knew I wanted to have a family right away, even though I didn't start my family until my mid 20s, which for my generation was like really late. I was like really late starting to have kids at 26. And so, but I couldn't wait because I wanted to be a mom. And I remember when I had Shailene, she's my firstborn. When I had Shailene, um, I remember I wanted I wanted the the first words that she learned or that she said, like, to be positive words. and I saw people that had children, like the first words they would say would be no, right? No, 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 don't touch that. No, no, don't do that. No, no, don't go there, you know. And I didn't want that for her. So I practiced really hard about like taking things out of the way that, you know, she shouldn't touch or get into or whatever, or doing things like that, and trying to remind people like, you know, please don't say no, because I didn't want that to be her first word. So one of my goals then was to really focus on the positive, and to be positive. And so I remember that. I remember that as well. And then also the other part of parenting was really figuring out like our role as a parent. And so last night I was up late because I took a nap in the day. And I was thinking about today and the things that I wanted to say, and thinking about parenting, and I was having my own um, my own joyous moment, like thinking back to, you know, my kids when they were young and all this kind of stuff. And so one of the other things is like figuring out our roles. And so our role as a parent changes across the course of a child's life, right? So when the child is first born, you know, our job is like to keep them alive. You know, we have to feed them and clothe them and take care of those basic needs. And then the other thing that we have to do is love them. Like that's our job, right? Is to love them and to help them feel safe and secure and loved. And then as they get older, then our roles continue to change as a parent. And so even being aware of that, right? Like my role is going to change as a parent as my child grows and matures. So just thinking about that, and then also thinking about what am I still doing to grow and develop and mature as a person, because that's going to impact the way that we parent as well, right? The more mature that we become, that's going to impact our parenting. That's why like healing is so important. And healing also is like, it's not a destination, it's a journey. Like healing really is a journey. And so we need to just be mindful of that, because our kids are the beneficiaries of our healing journeys. And so when we think about our roles as a parent, you know, sometimes there's another parent, right? If you have a partner, um, or if you're co-parenting, if you're not together, a really important part of parenting is like to be on the same page. And sometimes we're not even in the same book, right? Um, so that's super important, to at least get in the same book. And then ideally to be on the same page in terms of parenting. And we have to think about, ideally, it would be great to think about this before you have a child, about how you want to parent and what are their views on all kinds of stuff. So we can think about what are their views on discipline, as an example. Okay. And many people were raised with, you know, what people will call corporal punishment, or being spanked or hit as discipline, right? And what if you don't want to hit or spank, but your partner totally believes in hitting and spanking? Or what if you were raised, your behavior management that your parents or grandparents or foster parents used was about shaming you, and that was the behavior management. And so what if your partner wants to shame the children to change their behavior, and you don't want that, because you understand that shaming is trauma. So it's like figuring all these things out before you become a parent. You know, what are the thoughts of your co-parent or your parents' views on spirituality or religion? And do you agree with that? And what are you going to teach your children? You know, what about cultural values? What are the cultural values or the social values of the person that you're going to be parenting with? So just like figuring out all those kinds of things before you become a parent is like so important. I have, you know, in our work we talk with, you know, thousands of people, and this one woman one time talked about her, she had her first child, her and her husband, and she thought she was in this healthy relationship and like everything was going to be fine. They never really talked about parenting, and then they became parents. It was planned. They became a parent, And then later, the she realized that her husband was homophobic, right? And then one day their son came to them and shared with them that he was gay, that he was two-spirited, and it caused a lot of problems in their relationship. And the parents actually split up. They got together later, because the man like intentionally worked on his own stuff, but it caused a breakup there for a while. So even being mindful of that, and understanding our views on all kinds of stuff. So um when our roles change, we have to be okay with change. And I share that because people of trauma have a hard time with change. Sometimes I call change the C word, because people don't want to change, or it's hard for us. And part of that is because of trauma. So our roles change as parents. And so we have to be open to that. So we're okay with it, because our job is to make sure that they feel okay with it, right? So, right before this, I was checking in. Two of my kids were here, or were out there earlier, and so I was talking to them. I go, "Hey, I'm doing this thing about parenting. What do you want me to say?" And we start talking about discipline. And so when before I became a parent, when I was figuring out what kind of parent I want to be, and I really like took a dive into my traditional values, and looking at traditional parenting practices, and learning all I could, and talking to people. And because of my work, I was actually on this project where we got to talk to all these elders about parenting and about healthy relationships, and so that was awesome. And I learned a lot. And um so discipline for me, I gave birth to four children, and I also helped to raise my nephew, who I parented just like as my own. Even though I used to always tell him, I'm not trying to be your mom or replace your mom, but I'm going to treat you as my own. And he's 36 now. He just had his birthday. And um so and so he's 36, my youngest is 20, and then three in the middle in between there. And I never once disciplined my kids. And I'm not like bragging or anything like that, but I did behavior management in other ways. So I never spanked them or hit them. I never, put their nose in the corner, or all these things that we hear people do. Like I never did that with my kids. Um, but I talked to them, and if they did something that, um, was wrong or whatever, like I talked to them, and I helped them to learn the lesson. And I would even come back and ask them, what did you learn, and what will you do differently next time? And so when I was asking my kids earlier, like, about discipline, they both laughed, and they go, um, well, I remember you yelled at me once, Shadron said. So we start talking about this time I was yelling after I asked them to do something three times and no one did it. So I finally yelled, and I remember Tristan coming upstairs. He's like, "Geez, Mom, you don't have to yell at us." And I said, "Oh, well, I assumed that your hearing went out or something, because I said it three times and nobody did anything." So anyway, so we had a good laugh about that. And so the I didn't have a need to ground them or discipline them in that way, because what I also focused on was building those building blocks from the beginning of respect. So me showing them respect so that they can show me respect. And so we did that from the get-go. And so I have respectful kids. And so the discipline thing, um I didn't need to focus on that. So, when we teach our family values that are based in culture, and respect is a part of that. And when we take the time to allow for mistakes, because mistakes, I don't really look at mistakes as wrong, because we learn from them, right? We learn. And I remember Like this one time, Shailene was like 3 and Traven was just a baby. And me and Shailene were gonna take a time. I was gonna take her to like, I don't know, Disney ice skating thing or something like that. So I got her all ready. She had a new clothes outfit. I braided her hair all pretty and she was all nice. And then I went to get ready. And so the day before, I had just painted our hallway and our living room. I always had these crazy colors, but I just painted over it with white. I must have been tired of these crazy colors. Anyway, so I painted the hallway and the living room white. And then the next day, I was taking Shailene on this little outing, and so I got her all ready, and then I went to get ready. So while I was getting ready, Shailene took a black marker and an orange marker, and she put them together in her hand, and she went down the hallway with the markers, this big old black and orange wiggly line down the hallway. And she turned the corner, and she went into the living room, and then she was writing these circles on the wall. You know, that was kind of like her art as a 3-year-old. And she was really proud of her artwork. And so she came to get me to show me her artwork. And so, of course, this hallway, freshly painted hallway, was like this canvas, right? And I guess this is when her artistic side came out. So she came to get me to show me her artwork. So I went in the living room, and so I'm like, wow, this is really nice. And I stood her next to it and I took her picture. And, because to her, this was her beautiful art, right? And I wasn't going to yell and get mad because I just painted it. I had more paint and I just had to repaint over it, which I did. And so we can think about like our responses as parents. Are we responding or are we reacting to things? All right. So I just wanted to share that example. And then a similar story. Then Traven, he gets older and he's like 3, and I just had his brother, and my sister came up to stay with me for a while and help me, with my baby and stuff and the kids. And we had this fireplace in our house, and it was painted blue, like the other owner painted it blue. And it was like these beautiful lava rocks, and but it was blue. It's kind of ugly. Anyway, we decided to paint it, and so we spent all this time figuring out colors and all of this and sponge painting and doing the painting the grout and spending all these hours and time on it, and we finally got it all done. And then we were doing something whatever, and Traven comes in to get me to show me his artwork, what he did. And so he had gotten to the into the garage and got this little jar of fluorescent orange paint and a stick, and somehow he opened up that paint and he put his stick in there, and he was like painting over the fireplace that we had just spent all these days and hours painting, and it had all these fluorescent orange streaks on it from his stick. And so he came to show me his artwork, so there again, like, oh wow, pretty, took his picture. And then of course we're explaining to them, like, not to write on the walls or not to, paint on there. And so it's things like that. And it's funny because when I was little, I remember part of the story, and then my mom told me the other part. My grandpa was babysitting us one time, and I remember sitting on this chair, and I'm sitting backwards, and I had this red marker, and I'm just drawing circles on this green chair, like this 1960s 1970s green chair, and I'm just drawing these big red circles on it. And my grandpa came and picked me up, and he just laughed, and he picked me up and sat in the chair and then put me on his lap. And then I don't remember this part, but my mom was telling me that I just kept writing on his face and he let me do that, so that's funny. Anyway, so things like that, responding versus reacting to when our kids do things. And is it really the end of the world if they write on the wall? There's things that we can do to remedy that, right? So another thing about parenting is when we look at the values that we were raised with and the values that we want to instill in our children, like that will impact them for their life. Okay. And I remember one time when my youngest, my baby just turned 20. And when he was 5, um, I took my kids and my daughter's friend, and we were at this powwow, and we came home late. It was like after midnight, and we pulled into the driveway, and I felt something like wasn't right. It was weird. I just had like this really strong feeling that something wasn't right. And I told the kids, hold on, just wait in the car, I'll be right back, or wait in the van. And so they stayed in the van, and I went to my front door, and I put my hand on the doorknob, and I just felt this really strong sense even more. And I tried to open the door, and it wasn't locked, and I had locked it before I left. And I'm a single parent now. I'm a single mom of five, and so I didn't want to go into the house. I was scared because it was locked when I left, and now it's unlocked, and nobody was home. And so I went back into the van, and I drove up the road, and I parked, and I called my dad, and I just said, I think somebody might be in my house. Anyway, it was called, and he goes, okay, I'm gonna come. I go, what are you gonna do? He goes, I'm gonna bring my gun. I'm like, oh, great. Didn't want my dad doing that. So I called the police, and finally it took them forever, but finally they came. And sure enough, my house had been robbed. We had been robbed. And so we went to stay at my parents' house. I didn't let my kids go in. The house was like a disaster. And it looked like it was young kids that came in and just ransacked. And then most of the things that were stolen, like were my kids' stuff, their games and scooters and stuff like that. And but they wrecked everything else. Like it was just wrecked. Like the whole house, the couch had a big tear in it. Everything from the fridge was thrown out. Like digging in our closets, things were just thrown everywhere. There wasn't a surface that wasn't cleared. Anyway, it took like seven adults like all day long to clean the house. And so I was um I was scared to go back into my house, but I had to show courage to my kids. I couldn't be afraid. I didn't want to be afraid. I didn't want to show them fear because I didn't want them to be scared to live in their house. And so we got rid of the couch that was tore, and cleaned up. And then so I brought my kids home that night. And so we walked in, and so now the living room's all empty because we got rid of the couch and stuff. And anyway, we walked in, and this was January. This was in January. And so Shadron, my youngest, he was 5 at the time. Um, he on his Christmas list, he had 4 things written down that he wanted, and one of them was a candle, a round candle. And I'm not sure why he wanted a round candle, but I got him a round candle for Christmas. So we all walked into the house, and he went and got his little round candle, and he went and got a braid of sweetgrass. And for those of you that knew him when he was little, or even know him now, like, he didn't talk a lot when he was little. He didn't talk till he was like 3. I don't think he needed to because he was the baby and everybody did everything. But anyway, he went and got this little round candle, and he went and got his braid of sweetgrass. And without talking, he made us all come into the living room. And without talking, he told us to stand in a circle. And without talking, he told us to sit down. And without talking, he told his brother to light that candle and to light that sweetgrass, and for each of us to smudge with it. He did this all without talking. And then he said, okay, now we're all going to talk about how we feel. He goes, and I'm going to go first. And he said, I want to pray for the robbers, and I want to pray that they don't ever do this to anybody else. And I want to pray for them, and I hope they have the things that they needed. And I hope this never happens to us or anyone else again. And that's all he said. And we're all crying by now, right? And then one by one, each of us, all the kids and myself, we all shared about how we felt. And then he told us to get up without talking. And then he took that sweet grass and he lit it again on his little candle. And he led us from room to room, and he smudged out every single room in the house to make it safe again for all of us to come in. And so I had already known that, he's just this old soul, right? And that was just another example of it. I think I was going to share that story, but anyway, it's just an awesome story because it shows about his cultural values, and then it shows like just his path that he's on in life, right? It's pretty awesome. But anyway, just helping to cultivate cultural values with our young people, because it's literally going to impact them for their whole entire life. And um when they embrace that, then they're going to pass that on someday if he chooses to have children, or if any of my kids choose to have children. I have one granddaughter. They're going to pass those values on, and then they're going to pass those values on, etc., etc. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. So the discipline thing, there's another piece tied to the whole discipline thing. And like with a lot of things in our society, things come and go. And there used to be um a a disciplinary school of thought about tough love. There's books about tough love, and you hear people talk about tough love, and all of that kind of stuff. And when we come from trauma, like, tough love sometimes always isn't the best thing, right? Because sometimes tough love is re-traumatizing. Um, and certainly, there's going to be cases where tough love is needed, or whatever. But it's just about being mindful about how tough your tough love is, right? And being clear on what it is and what it isn't. And even looking at, if tough love isn't working, then you might want to try a different approach. Okay. And if you have more than one child, different approaches are going to be needed for all of your children, because they're all going to be different. So what worked with one may not work with another one, right? So we have to, like, be aware how our children learn and how our children respond, and things like that. And then we as the parent have to act accordingly. All right. So also tied to tough love, sometimes we don't discipline at all, um, because of our own fear that our kids aren't going to like us. And so when we have our trauma lens on, and we can see, um, is that our trauma coming out, right? Are we people pleasers, and we can't even say or do anything to our children because they might not like us? See, you see what I'm saying? This is how our trauma plays out. So if we're afraid to tell our children anything, then they may continue to keep doing the things that they shouldn't be doing, right? Or sometimes our own codependency might get in the way of trying to redirect or guide our children, right? So, however you want to do behavior management, traditional behavior management or tough love behavior management, um, we have to be mindful about how our trauma impacts that. So, if we're codependent, then that's going to come out in the way that we parent. And so, if you have um questions, or what is codependency or whatever, like, this is only an hour long program, but we can Google things, and we can read books, and we can learn more about what that means, and then how it might overlap with our own parenting. So just some things to think about in terms of our discipline. So um I'm just kind of looking at some of the comments here and see if there's any questions. um So the other thing I wanted to talk about was, one of the roles, I guess you could say, that I really took to heart as a parent, especially when my children were younger, was my job as a parent is to create positive memories. So this is especially when they're young, right? Like, my job is to create positive memories. So when they get older and when they look back on their childhood, they'll remember, like, all these fun times, or fun things that they did. And it doesn't it doesn't mean that we always have to have a lot of money to take them places, or anything like that. It could be things that we do at home. It could be spending time reading books to them, or things like that. And I think we hear lots of people say that time, right, is one of the best gifts that we can give anyone, our time, right? And so that was my job that I really took seriously, about creating positive memories for my children. And it's funny because my kids, they were all in sports, and here I am as a single mom. I could not be in two places at once. And thankfully I had my parents, and I had other friends and family members that I leaned on for help. It's like, okay, I'll take these two to this game. Can you take these three to this game, and then go to that game, and then I'll meet you up over here at this game? And so it was always that. Um, and so even with my work schedule and traveling, like, that was a priority that I made, was to make all their games. And of course, I couldn't make every single one. And so it's always funny because what do they remember? They don't remember the 50 games that I attended. They'll remember the one that I wasn't at. when and I share that because that's how important it is, right? For us to be present, like to be present at things, games, or music concerts, or things like that. Like, it's important for us to show up and to be present, and to take that time to do that. So I just wanted to share that. And then the other thing, we're a powwow family. So every weekend we're going somewhere. And we were at this one powwow one time, and um my kids were playing with their cousins, and they were all the boys all the boys were playing, and they had these sticks, and of course they were swords, and so they're playing with their swords. And one of my sons had the longest sword, he had the longest stick. And so one of his other cousins got mad because he had the longest stick, and so he took it from him. And then and then my son was like, well, give me my stick back, and his cousin was like, oh, you want your stick back? And he goes, here. And he broke it over his knee. And then he had two sticks. And so he gave him back. He goes, here's your swords. And so he gave him back. And then my son was standing there, and he had the two swords like that. And he goes, oh, cool, now I have two swords. So he made the best out of the situation, even though his long sword was broken in half. So that's like, when you teach your children, like, to respond and not react. When you teach your children about the power of positivity, you know when you teach your children about kindness and compassion, then that's what they're going to show, right? And around that same time, another quick story, around that same time, through my work, I took my kids with me to wherever I could in my work. They've been all over the country, and into all kinds of communities, and all kinds of events and gatherings, and tribal gatherings, and social gatherings, and ceremonial gatherings, and trainings, and workshops, and meetings. My kids grew up in that, doing that. And this one time, um, it was in 2007. And I don't know if you can hear that noise. Sorry, we're a bunch of work is going on outside. Anyway, um, we went to this event, and it was called the Seeds of Compassion. And like the Dalai Lama was going to be there, and all kinds of stuff. And so we were driving. This was up in Seattle, Washington. So we were driving up there, and we were defining what compassion is as a family. So I'm asking, I always have a van, all these kids, and so I'm asking them, what does compassion mean to you? And like, nobody knew what it was. And my kids were little. And so we're talking about what it is. What is compassion, and what does it look like? And so we're defining it as a family. So then we get to this event, and we're up there for a week. And my boys, we were in this hotel room, and it kind of had like a bedroom part and kind of like a living room part. And my boys were in the living room, and they were talking, and they were saying, oh, they were calling each other names, and kind of fighting around or whatever. And I was just listening, and one of them said, geez, you're not being very compassionate. And the other brother goes, "Oh yeah, huh? What does that mean again?" And the other brother said, "Well, geez, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you." So it was so awesome. Like, here's these little kids, 4 and 6, or I don't know, 3, and I don't remember how old they were. They were little, but they're talking about compassion, right? And so then that was a teaching moment for me to go in there and remind them what compassion means, and remind them examples of showing about compassion. So what happened after that, the word compassion became a behavior management tool. So we go to this event, we do all this cool stuff, like we meet the Dalai Lama, all of this, and then we go home and everyone, I'm inspired. So then when my kids are fighting, I would just be like walking by and I just say compassion, and then I would keep going. So that would be their reminder. Like, is that compassionate behavior what you're doing right now? So I wouldn't have to intervene or get mad. I would just say compassion as I'm walking through the living room, right? So that became, for many years, that became a behavior management tool, just the word compassion. So I wanted to share that story. So there's tons of stories about, um, you know, parenting and the things that worked or didn't work. And the other part of it is like, not beating ourselves up, right? Like, we do the best we can with what we know, and we as long as we're continually trying to be the best parent that we can be, then 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 most often, things are going to work out, right? Things are going to work out. So, like, don't be hard on yourself, and we can always ask our children for forgiveness. We can ask our children for forgiveness and show them and tell them, like, I don't always get it right, but I'm trying here, right? So we can ask our children for forgiveness, and we can check in with our children. So this is another thing that I did with my children, is that I would check in with them, like, individually, and then together. I would ask them, about, um how, are you happy? How am I doing as a mom? Or I would ask them questions like that, even now as they're adult children. And um 3 of my kids are still in the home, and one is away at school right now. But I still ask them, even at this age, how am I as a mom? Is there anything that I can do to be a better mom? And they'll tell me. They tell me. And so, and that's pretty awesome. So, oh gosh, there's just so much and so many stories. I'm looking at my notes and I'm kind of like halfway through, and I'm like, I only have 9 minutes left. um so the other thing is, that I think is important, and I talked a little bit about, like, being positive and being calm. Like, those are really crucial. And this other, fun parenting story is, one time we went on this trip and to California, and we were going down to Disneyland. And my sister lives 10 minutes from Disneyland, and so we were going to her house. And so my oldest Fred, he just turned 16, and I took him in to get his driver's license, because I said, we're going on this long trip and you're going to help me drive. Because I was a single parent, like I said earlier. And so we drove down there. We had an awesome weekend. We went to Disneyland, and had this awesome time. And then it was time to get on the road. And so, traveling with kids, for me, it was easier to travel at night. I would just, like, drive all night. And so we had a cooler, and we packed all these, a good lunch and all this kind of stuff. I gassed up, and we left like around 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday night. And my sister, while I was there, she borrowed like $20, and then she paid me back before I left, and she paid me back $17. Like, hey, Janelle, you owe me $3. No, just kidding. Anyway, so I stuck that in my pocket, and then we got on the road and we left. And so I'm in this little minivan and it gets really good gas mileage. And so we're driving along in California and there's kind of like nothing around. And I was like, oh, I bet there was a gas station coming up. And it was like just a gas station out in the middle of nowhere. And I thought, oh, I better stop and get gas while I can. And so I pull in there and I fill it up. And then I go into the middle of the car in the middle of the seats to grab my purse and my purse isn't there. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And then I saw my purse at the on the counter at my sister's house. I'm like, great. So I have the $17 and the gas came to like $14 or something. So I go pay and then I'm just like, oh, I have a van load of 5 kids and I don't have a purse. No money, no bank cards, no credit cards, nothing. And I thought, oh well, when I get to so and so, I have some friends there. I'll call them and borrow some money. That was my plan. So we get on the road and we keep going. And then now we made it to Sacramento. Now it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. We get to Sacramento and the kids are all sleeping, so they don't know I don't have any money. And we pull up into the gas station, but I kind of pull away, and Fred kind of wakes up, and I told him, I said, "Hey, I don't have my purse." I go, "Help me dig around for change." You know how you have change in the ashtray, and so we're digging around for change, and we came up with a couple bucks, and plus I had the couple bucks left from the other fill up, and so I pull up to the thing, and I get like $4 worth of gas. I'm on empty, and I get like $4. So now we're like at a quarter a tank. And I thought, well, I have friends, let me call them. And so I called a friend, and oh no, I couldn't find their number. And I call another friend and they didn't answer. It's like, well, crap, there goes that plan. And so now it's like it was super foggy. The kids were still asleep and only Fred knew. And it was just like super foggy, and I'm going like 30 miles an hour because I can barely see. The fog is so thick, and I just start praying. And this was like the most humble prayer I've ever had, even to this day. I think it was just like the most humble prayer I've ever had. And I just said, please just let us make it home safely, and please just show me a sign that everything's going to be okay. And then all of a sudden the fog just cleared, like, and it was only around my van. It was like a tunnel of clearness, and then there was fog everywhere else, and just this sense of calm and peace came over me, and I was just like, okay, well, we're going to be okay. I don't know how we're going to get home, but we'll be okay. So we kept driving like for like another hour, and I was getting tired, so I woke up Fred and I'm like, hey, can you drive for a little bit? So he drove. Now we get to the next town. Now the kids are all awake and they're eating sandwiches and all this kind of stuff. And I told them, I go, hey, we don't have any money and I don't know how we're gonna get gas to get home. So we pull up this other gas station. I'm okay, you guys have dig around everywhere. Look for money, wherever you can. So everyone's digging all over. And it was kind of like a game, right? It's like, oh, I found 10 cents. Anyway, so we pull all our money and we have like $1.90. And so I pull up into the gas station, and the lady comes out, and I go, can we have $1.90 in gas? She's looking at all these kids in the van. So I tell her what happened, and she's like, oh, you should call a church. They could probably give you some gas money. I'm like, oh, good idea. So I go to the payphone, putting in our precious change, and it was before 8 o'clock, and the church wasn't opened, and their voicemail came on, but it took the change, right? I'm like, dang it. So I go back and I'm like, oh, now can I have $1, whatever, $1.50 gas, whatever, how much the phone was. Anyway, the lady felt bad and she gave us an additional $2. And so we got like almost $4 worth of gas. And so there we were, we had a quarter tank again. So we hit the road and I told the kids, okay, you guys better pray because that's how we're getting home. And then my nephew, my other nephew who I kept for a while, he said, Auntie, I have to go to the bathroom. And I was like, why didn't you go at the gas station? Now I have to waste gas driving off the road into the rest area. So we drove into this rest area, and I told the kids, okay, now look on the ground for money. So the kids were, it was like this adventure. And my nephew comes back and he's waving something, and it's this magazine. This is like this Watchtower magazine, and this Jehovah Witness guy was out there. He had this white suit on and white pants and a big fancy white car, and he was out there passing out magazines. And so my nephew gets in. I'm like, okay, cool, get in. And then we backed out, we started leaving. And then I had this idea. I had been in upstate New York the week before for work, and I had bought this beaded bracelet and this silver bracelet, and I had them in the ashtray in my van. And the ashtray is clean because I don't smoke. Anyway, I had this idea of selling those bracelets to the Jehovah Witness guy. And so I pulled back in and I told my nephew, go ask him if he wants to buy these. You know, I bought them for 20 each, but whatever he wants to pay. So he's all excited and he runs out. I'm just like so embarrassed. I can't even look. And so I turn around, he's running back and he has $5. And I'm like, you sold them for $5? And he's like, no, he didn't want them, but he gave us $5. And I'm like, okay, you know, wave to the nice man. Anyways, we got $5 more and we're at a quarter tank again. Long story short, we made it home. And it was like this fun adventure. So because I stayed calm and I stayed positive, so did the kids, right? So did the kids. So as parents, we're like leaders in our families as well, right? And the children are going to go by our lead. And so then we would, you know, we had this awesome story to tell, and everybody had their part, you know, oh, I found the last dollar, all this kind of stuff. Because we still were a ways away from home. And at our final stop to get gas, we're like 2 hours away from the house, and we're on empty. And my friends weren't answering every town. It's like, call my friends to borrow money. No one was answering the phone. And the last stop, my son, we're like digging out our dirty clothes, we're digging in pockets, and my son pulls out his backpack and he pulls out this little coin purse and he pulls out $14. And it was like we won the lottery, and it was like we were millionaires. We had $14. And his dad had stuck it in there for him spending money, and he didn't know. And anyway, so we like almost filled up our tank with $14. We made it home safe. And but it was funny. So anyway, that I love that story too, because it's about, you know, the power of prayer. And so we model that with our kids. And, you know, when we travel now, before we go, someone in the van takes a healthy risk and they say the prayer for safe travels. So that story is about prayer and perseverance. It's about determination, and it's about faith. It's about having faith that we were going to be fine, that we were going to be safe, and that we did kind of turn it into an adventure, you know. And so I modeled that for our kids. So anyway, it's already 1 o'clock, and I didn't even get through the rest of the things that I wanted to share. Maybe I'll do another part two or something. But I did wanted to. Somebody said, "Oh, I like your shirt." So we have these shirts that some of our presenters wear, and this one's called Grandma Up. Whoops. Hopefully Shailene gets that. This one is called Grandma Up, and this was actually Jean's idea. Of course, for those of you that know Jean Tagaban, sorry. For those of you that know Jean Tagaban, does his grandma character. But what this Grandma Up shirt means is like, you know, here we are in this pandemic, right? And we need to take it serious and to stay home and to be safe and to, you know, all of that, you know, so our families are safe and our communities are safe. And sometimes we just have to muster the strength of our grandmas, right? Our grandmas who lived through the depression and who lived through other pandemics, and our grandmas who like could do anything, right? That's what this shirt means, is that sometimes all of us, whether we're what gender we are, whatever, that we can grandma up. And so that's, I wore this shirt specifically today, as a reminder for my own self to grandma up, and to remind you to grandma up as well. And we want you to stay safe. We want you to practice social distancing and to stay home if you can. And if you go out, to wear a mask. And just to keep yourself safe. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the stories. I certainly enjoyed this. The hour flew by. And please tune in tomorrow. We're going to have a conversation with our Native Wellness Institute board, and we're going to talk about, you know, how are we doing in this pandemic, and what are we doing to stay balanced. And we're just going to talk about, you know, healing and wellness and things like that. So please tune in tomorrow. And the next week we'll have another amazing lineup. Will and I are going to do a cooking show next week with things from the garden, and we're looking forward to that as well. So have an amazing day. Regardless if you have children or your whatever age your children are or grandchildren, um, please take to heart, you know, some of the sentiments and some of the stories that were shared today. So, all right, have an awesome day, everyone. We'll see you next time.